Good morning. I'm Matt Smith, President of the Greater Pittsburgh Chamber of Commerce, and we want to welcome you to the second panel of our virtual Pittsburgh reception. We normally be meeting in person and talking about issues that are important to the region face to face. But as we all navigate through the pandemic, we're hosting this virtual panel with really key policymakers from throughout the region and the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. And we thought this was a good way to help advance the issues that unfortunately we can't do in person, but think we've got a great panel for you here today. As our team huddled on to discuss what issue to focus on for this event, it was clear. In our view, and I said this in our earlier panel, that there's not a more unifying or important issue that the new Biden administration, the new Congress, and our state leaders must take on than infrastructure. And infrastructure, as you all know, is broadly defined to include not only what many would think of as the traditional forms of infrastructure, things like highways, items like highways, bridges, public transportation, those traditional modes of transportation, but very frequently infrastructure includes items that may not be front of mind when we talk or have talked about this topic in the past. 5G, broadband, other forms of infrastructure that provide a 21st century spine to regions as they compete for talent and as they compete for business investment. And we know in this region, to remain globally competitive, we need a modern infrastructure system, and connectivity in all of its forms is really going to allow us to thrive and truly unlock an economy that does have equity at its core. And we think that's a critical part of not only the traditional infrastructure discussion, but the discussion we're here to have with you today that's going to be focused on the next generation of connectivity and regional infrastructure. And so I'm going to dispense with some of the discussion that we had earlier today, because I know we want to get right to the panel. But the one point I want to make is that it's absolutely crucial in this context for and the opportunity exists for business to work together with labor, with nonprofits, with our public sector leadership in much the same way that we did on Act 89. And I know a few of the folks here with us today were really involved in that process. And I think that's what we're really going to need in terms of coming together for the next process. Business, labor, coming together around this single objective, I think, is absolutely crucial. To that end, we were very happy in the earlier panel, as well as this panel, to not only have elected officials join us on the panel, but to have elected officials join us as participants and attendees. And so I want to just make sure that I recognize, I know we had State Representative Val Gatos with us earlier today. I believe she's able to join us again. State Representative Josh Kale, State Representative Jim Marshall, our good friend, State Representative Jake Wheatley, Commissioner Kevin Boozle from Butler County, Commissioner Jack Manning from Beaver. We also have the offices of Congressman Lamb, Senator Casey, and Lieutenant Governor Fetterman represented as in attendance here with us today as well. And we appreciate, first of all, their interest in these panels, and most of all, we appreciate their consistent partnership in working on issues like this that we know will move the region's economy forward, and that we know will move the region's quality of place forward, as I said, with equity at its core. And so without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to the panel sponsor. We're very pleased that NRG Energy sponsored today's panel, and we're joined with us today by Sarah Battisti, who is NRG's Director of Government Affairs. And so without further ado, I will turn the floor over to Sarah. Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. I'll just quickly say thank you to everyone for joining today. We appreciate the panelists as well. And I want to thank Matt and the Chamber for their continued efforts during a very difficult year to continue to move this region forward and continue to have really robust conversations and talking about issues that need to move us forward and to keep us connected. So without further ado, we can move on to the panel. And once again, thank you for joining.
So again, welcome back and thank you all for joining our 2020 virtual Pittsburgh reception. And as you may have heard in our opening discussion, we designed these panels to be interactive. So please submit all questions in the Q&A function below. On behalf of the Greater Pittsburgh Chamber of Commerce, an affiliate of the Allegheny Conference, and our entire team, we'd like to thank our sponsors for the continued work. And again, we'd like to thank NRG Energy. In this panel, we will discuss the vital role the infrastructure investment plays in the Pittsburgh region's future economy, quality of life, and important investments in the area, like broadband and public transit to connect opportunity to all of our regions. So today I look forward to having a robust conversation with our panelists, and I'd like to introduce each of them. Honorable Joanna McClinton, 191 District of the House Democratic Leader of Pennsylvania House of Representatives. The Honorable Pam Snyder, 50th District, Pennsylvania House of Representatives. The Honorable Morgan Boyd, Chair Board of Commissioners of Lawrence County. And the Honorable Pat Fabian, Board of Commissioners of Armstrong County. So if we could just hear from Honorable Joanna McClinton on some of your opening remarks.
Good morning, and thank you for that warm welcome, Patrice. It's so great to get across the state from my dining room.
Isn't that lovely? With COVID, we get to make that happen.
Yes, it's the only benefit of, working virtually most of the time is that you get to stay where you are and participate in excellent opportunities like this. It was almost a year ago that I was able to sit down with the president in my former role as caucus chair and have a great intro with many of your members. So I'm excited to be here today. I'm so glad to hear how many of the colleagues I serve with in the House are on the call or on this panel. And I look forward to learning from you and making sure that all of your priorities are on our collective agenda as we go into the 2021-2022 legislative session, which begins in just a few short weeks. And I look forward to making sure that we see growth. In these times, we've had so much turmoil and so many challenges, but we need to see growth. We need to make sure that Pennsylvania's workers are working and that our economy is able to grow in spite of the challenges, and that we sit together to get solutions to get us through these challenging times. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative McClinton. And up next, we have the Honorable Pam Snyder, 50th District, Pennsylvania House of Representatives. Good morning, Pam.
Good morning, everyone. It's really a pleasure for me to be here. I'm so happy we're joined by my new leader, Representative McClinton. I don't think it's any secret that this is an issue that I have been championing for over 3 years now. This is something that is truly important, not just to the region, but to the state and this country. The things that I have been working on and talking about for 3 years, I think truly has come to light for so many people through this pandemic. We cannot compete if we cannot connect. And it is so important now more than ever that we find a way to come together. This is not a partisan issue. This is an issue that affects every single person in this country, whether they recognize it or not. And I think this pandemic has proven that to so many folks, whether it is, our students needing to be able to log on now to get their education, telemedicine for folks that couldn't get to their doctor's offices safely, down to, I like to even say for grandma who's been quarantined and has no human interaction to be able to see her grandchildren's face on her device or her iPad or her phone, just to have some kind of interaction. This is so important, and I'm so happy to be a part of this panel today and to be able to talk about what we can do collectively and what we need to do moving forward. So thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Representative Snyder. And up next, we also have the Honorable Morgan Boyd, Chair of Board of Commissioners for Lawrence County. Welcome.
Hey, Patrice, thank you for having me, and thank you to everyone out there in the audience taking time out of their day to discuss the issues with us. I was sworn in to Lawrence County Commissioners on January 8th of this year, January 6th of this year. And when I got sworn in, one of the big issues that was on the horizon was broadband connectivity. It was making sure that our residents had access to affordable internet. With the pandemic hitting Lawrence County and hitting Western Pennsylvania in early March, that transformed to the forefront of our minds. And, I think I can definitively say, I know Pam has touched on it here, and I know that the Democratic leaders touched on it. There is no larger issue pressing for the future of Western Pennsylvania than the deployment of broadband infrastructure across our rural communities. It allows us to remain connected to the world, allows us access to global markets. It allows us access to telemedicine, telework, and it provides our residents the ability to actually join the 21st century economy, something that before widespread broadband was an issue and was being developed, they didn't have that opportunity. So I'm, like I said, extraordinarily excited to participate on this panel and extraordinarily excited to address the issues facing us with everyone here today. Thank you again for having me.
Don't you worry, we have some questions for you later on, Commissioner.
Glad to hear it.
And up next, we have the Honorable Pat Fabian, Board of Commissioners for Armstrong County. Welcome, Pat. Oh, Commissioner, if you could just adjust your mic, I don't believe we can hear you. One moment, Commissioner. Let's just see if we can get this fixed there. It seems, Commissioner, it might be on your end. Is your volume up on your side and everyone? Okay. We'll have Commissioner, one of our folks message you and see if we can get that fixed. So we'll go ahead and pivot, Commissioner, and someone's going to try to get you on, okay? All right, all apologies for that. We're going to try to get the Commissioner on and moving here. So as we just got through some of our introductions, I think we can just get to some of our Q&A. So if we could have our representatives and commissioners turn on their mics and their cameras. And we will have Commissioner Pat Fabian join us a little later here. Hello all, okay. So we're gonna get started with the Q&A. I think everyone's excited to get that started. So here we go. So we're excited to have you guys here for several reasons. And one is to learn about the unique challenges and similarities our communities within the region and state are facing. And as you've known, the past and present challenges with broadband access for all. And as we figure out, living during a pandemic and the importance of the broadband access for all. The internet is changing sectors and industries, and to meet new demands, our industries, rural and urban, need reliable and high-speed connections. And at the Allegheny Conference, we recognize solutions won't be found with a one-size-fits-all approach. We stand behind connecting people to quality internet access. And on that note, can each of you just touch on barriers your communities are facing when it comes to bridging that digital divide? Representative Snyder, would you like to jump in first?
Absolutely. The 50th district is extremely rural in many areas. And bridging that digital divide is very challenging, especially when you have that last mile challenge. It's one thing for companies to be able to pick up communities and areas where there's a saturation of homes and businesses. But when you get out into the rural areas, it's much more difficult, and it's very expensive for companies to be able to do that. We recognize that. a lot of the challenges that I see also are a lot of outdated infrastructure needs. We have companies that are still trying to push broadband through old lines and copper lines, and that just isn't sufficient in today's world. We have to be able to find a way to incentivize companies to be able to reach everyone, to be able to run fiber, to be able to have wireless, to be able to utilize satellite, whatever we have to do collectively to make sure that there's an opportunity for every homeowner and every business to be able to connect. This is a huge undertaking, and you were so right when you say there is not just one size fits all. I wish it were that simple. As I said in my opening remarks, I've been working on this for 3 years now, and we've made great progress legislatively to try to alleviate some of the cumbersome things that are out there that prohibit companies from being able to do some things that they need to do across this Commonwealth. And we have so much more to do through this process. Just to have people on this panel understand, the Pennsylvania Farm Bureau and the Pennsylvania Grange, they have walked this path with me hand in hand since I started this 3 years ago, because they recognize also the importance of this. When we talk about connecting for working at home and for our students and for telemedicine, the other thing I think we've recognized through this pandemic is our food supply chain. And it is so important for our agricultural community to be able to connect, to be able to have a successful farming in this Commonwealth, and that's still the #1 industry in this Commonwealth. Our farmers need to be able to connect, to be able to really compete on a global level in agriculture. So the challenges are just that, making sure that we can connect every resident, every business in this Commonwealth and across this country.
And how about a perspective from the other end of the state? Leader McClinton, love to hear some comments.
Absolutely. So I've been proud to partner with Representative Snyder in supporting her legislation. Multiple rounds. It's been bipartisan because it's actually a need that's not just in certain parts of southwestern PA. Believe it or not, in the capital of Comcast, and no offensive remarks here, but just being honest in this conversation, 2 miles from my house is Comcast, and both of their top skyscrapers. But in my neighborhood where I live and serve in Southwest Philly, we have a real challenge of connectivity. And it was exposed during this pandemic when students were told in April, to work remotely or to do school remotely. We started to see in raw data the number of households in Philadelphia that do not have connection to the internet. And it's just almost astonishing. And there are so many programs that Comcast has made available, but depending on whether or not you struggle with other things like being low income and having some sort of past outdue balance, many families couldn't qualify for that program. So that is something that is actually hitting home across the state as well, in a big major metropolitan. Like, it is not just in some of our suburban and rural communities. We are seeing it in the city of Philadelphia, and it has been something that people have been working on for a long time. But because of the pandemic we're all combating, we are having to make this a priority. Like, it can no longer just be, oh, we'll get to it. Like, no, we've got to get all of the major companies, as much as they can, working together intentionally to make sure that there's access and that people are able to get to work online, and that our students are able to learn online, and that the connectivity that wasn't existing does exist. I was just looking at some data here, and there was a low in the city that 30% of households in certain neighborhoods only had access to the internet. And that's not citywide. It just went neighborhood by neighborhood. They did a data track back in 2018, and it was something like, 4,000 row homes, only 30% of them had access to broadband internet. So it is something that we look forward to working on in the long term, but it has to be with some urgency, especially given the crisis we're facing.
Thank you. Commissioner, would you like to jump in?
Which one? You want me or do you want Commissioner Fabian?
Either one. Let's get it going.
All right, sure. Well, I'll jump in then. You know, in Lawrence County specifically, I think a lot of the focus on broadband and on internet is the actual deployment of fiber lines, of wireless, of different items that actually get physical broadband into homes. In Lawrence County, we're actually fortunate enough that 97% of our residents actually have access in the traditional sense, right? They're able to go out and plug into internet. That's actually the highest rate of broadband access across northwestern Pennsylvania, which is where that study area was from. What our problem is right now is these rural communities like Lawrence County are largely demographically, they aren't, the family household income isn't where it needs to be for individuals to be able to afford devices, right? Be able to afford, number one, access to plug into the internet, and number two, tablets, cell phones, laptops, things that actually provide you with that internet accessibility. And so, you know, for us here in Lawrence, and I think, you know, across Western Pennsylvania, especially when you get out into these more rural areas, when you're talking, you know, down in Greene County, talking in Forest County, you know, yeah, it's important that we get internet connectivity, that we get those fiber lines, that we get wireless entities run up to different population cores, but it's also important that we work to provide families and we work to provide working class people with access to devices, with access, and work to drive costs down so they can actually afford to access the internet that's right there in front of them.
Can you hear me now?
There it is.
Hey, I had a little sign here. I'm going to joke. You guys can read it. It says Armstrong County needs connectivity and broadband. So, but I just like to say again, thank you for having me today as a panelist. You know, 2020, being elected in 2016, we knew one of my initiatives was to enhance our broadband and connectivity ability throughout Armstrong County. One thing a lot of people don't know that we have an industrial park that has a surplus of fiber. One thing that we've been marketing, not only regionally, but throughout the country and have had some success, is housing data centers because of our capabilities at North Point here in Armstrong County. But the problem is that fiber that we have there at capacity does not bleed out into the rest of the county. And 2020 is and I heard Representative Snyder talk earlier, you know, as we transition this year to telework, remote learning through our school districts, it's really been a challenge. And I would say that 40% of our residents have connectivity throughout our rural county. So it also, right now, it's putting our school district in a position where, hey, talking to the school board president last week, that we'd love to do remote learning. We just don't have the capability. So students need to be in that classroom because we're so rural that they just don't have the connectivity. But one thing we've done since 2016 is we've identified projects, and we do have a project list to get connectivity throughout the county. The problem with that on the backside is funding issues. How do we fund these projects? So.
Thank you, Commissioner Fabian. So in March, if we can think back to March, I was probably sitting here doing a webinar at that point. But however, in March, Congress passed, the president signed the CARES Act, and that was a $2 trillion economic stimulus package to provide relief to the economy into law. And although the act provided additional funding for broadband infrastructure deployment, distance learning, telehealth services, it's clear that more assistance is needed to ensure all have access to affordable internet. States and local government also received a significant amount of funding under the CARES Act. Commissioners, can you speak to what the local governments have utilized this funding for, and did you pursue expanding broadband access with the pandemic? Dollars, and what would you be able to do with additional support for the county governments? So, Commissioner Boyd. Commissioner Fabian?
Yeah, I can tackle that. Armstrong County received and was very appreciative, $5.8 million. I'll be honest, and it's no secret, we could use an additional $5.8 million. But what we did was a small business grant for our small business owners throughout the county. We earmarked that at $2 billion. We retain some CARES Act money for ourselves, for money that we put out to our first responders, fire departments, throughout the county, whether it was PPEs and supplies that they need that they weren't getting early on. And also helping out our local hospital with testing capabilities and moonbeams and stuff to keep the hospital emergency rooms and ambulances clean and safe and have a quick turnaround so they can use those rooms, those ambulances without helping mitigate the spread. Additionally, we had earmarked, and I spoke about it earlier, we earmarked over the last couple of years several broadband projects that we'd like to do. What was difficult with the legislation is these projects that we wanted to do and wanted to spend money on using CARES Act funding, we were unable to do that because of this December 31st deadline. Had that deadline been extended, maybe sometime in the next year or the end of 2021, I think we could have increased our capabilities and enhanced connectivity throughout the county. We just didn't have the time to meet those projects, to have them ready.
And I'll touch on our end of the state. What we did was we prioritized, just like Armstrong County, getting some business grants out to make sure that our business community survived. We received about $7.7 million from the state. Special thank you to all the representatives that worked on pushing that package out. And about $3.3 million of that we earmarked for small businesses. 1 million of it went to nonprofits. We reserved some money for fire companies, just like Armstrong did. What we looked at doing was providing, in terms of connectivity, in terms of internet deployment, we looked at, because as has been mentioned, a huge issue right now is making sure that all the students in all the school districts are able to connect to their classes. We looked at giving different school districts large grant sums in order to help finance the purchasing of laptops and purchasing of wireless hotspots. Unfortunately, while $7.7 million is a sizable amount of money, the need presented by our business community and the need presented by our municipalities took priority, just because we did not want to get into a situation where we lost a tremendous amount of businesses or municipalities were forced to lay off crucial public safety workers such as police officers, firefighters, and other municipal support staff. What we were looking at in the event that we did get more money from the state, from their reserve funding, was our first priority was going to be to push out some additional funding to the schools to make those purchases. Unfortunately, that wasn't able to happen. I'm hopeful that another stimulus package will come down soon and will allow us to be able to embark on that endeavor. But right now, we didn't use unfortunately any of the money to go towards solving those wireless issues. It just wasn't enough to cover all the need there.
Thank you, Commissioner. I'm going to go ahead and talk to our state legislators now. Can you touch on any CARES Act funding that was used to provide internet, or any projects and priorities you would pursue with additional relief?
So I was going to wait for Pam, but I'll get started. So the CARES Act funding that came through from Congress, that came to the state capitol, we were able to distribute to the counties, as we just heard from the commissioners. I live in Philadelphia, but I also serve Delaware County, and both of those counties were able to do similarly, do small business grants because so many of our restaurants and our hair salons that really just, were not able to either stay open or had a big decline in their sales. They needed help. They needed help to just keep their lights on and to keep their places going, and hopefully going into the next year and able to last. One of the disappointing things that I must confess on this call with all who are here now or will watch it later is that I was hoping we could spend more of that money and send it to the counties for priorities, because it was so vague. There's a few different ways money could have been used, but unfortunately, when we did the state budget 3 weeks ago, the rest of the money that was outstanding, it was decided by my colleagues, predominantly in the majority party, to just use it to fill in the plugs, because we have a very large deficit and we were not able to keep the lights on in Harrisburg, literally speaking, but also figuratively, because of our just big, big deficit. The money that we normally would collect in taxes, we ended up with, just not getting it. And we now see going forward, because I know we're also talking about infrastructure, we have to figure out how we can get support for PennDOT. They had so many projects that stopped, that came to a halt, and they are now not getting the financing they normally would get, just from the turnpike poles. They're not getting the money because people aren't traveling. So this has all been a bit of a trickle down where we're all dealing with less, but that doesn't mean the needs change. So with the needs being the same, when we get back into the Capitol, we have to put a little more pressure on the folks in Washington, because they print the money. We don't print it in Harrisburg, but in DC, they actually print the money. So we need them to send us some more printed money, because all of our municipalities are just hurting. We're in a tough time. We need more support. And from being able to support PennDOT to being able to make sure there's like targeted investment in real broadband being built out. Like, we could do it, but we do need some more support.
Yes, and just to piggyback off of what everyone has said, I just want to say hats off to the county commissioners, because I sat in the county commissioner chair for 9 years, and I know how hard it is to make those decisions. The 50th district, I represent all and part of 3 different counties: Greene, Washington, and Fayette. And I know Fayette County commissioners were able to use a big chunk of their CARES money for a broadband project that's going to really help enhance connectivity in Fayette County. But the county commissioners are absolutely correct. This deadline that was imposed, it makes it almost impossible for a project to get completed by the end of the year. So I am hoping that when this new stimulus package comes down from the feds, that perhaps they will extend that deadline so that counties can utilize that money to be able to do a realistic project under a time frame that they can have completion. And my leader said it well. In Harrisburg, we, just like the counties and the municipalities, are struggling to survive. This has been a very trying time for everyone, and I think we all recognize that while we all may be on different levels of government, we are all struggling, and it's the small businesses and our schools and our universities and everyone out there is struggling through this pandemic. So we have got to find a way when we go back into session. I think it's important, and I know that this is a high priority, I think, for our federal government, the broadband expansion. It must be a high priority for we in the General Assembly in Harrisburg. We have to find a way to be able to do this, and I think we can.
Thank you, Representative Snyder. We have a question from the audience. What are your thoughts on placing connectivity on or with public utilities like water, gas, and electric?
Oh, I'll be happy to take that one. I have a bill out there. Last session, of course, our legislative session ended, and I just sent the co-sponsorship memo out again this week. And I am really, really hoping that this bill can move. It would open up the Municipal Authority Act of 1945 and include broadband in that act, just like municipalities are able to have water and sewage authorities. they would be able to do that for broadband also. And I think that's so important, because what we've seen across the Commonwealth in areas where they have the rural co-ops, they've been able to successfully provide broadband and do some projects that have really made rural communities be able to connect. But if you don't have a rural co-op, you can't do it. So my bill would allow municipalities, if they so choose, to be able to do broadband services.
Would anyone else like to touch on that question, or we can move forward? Okay. All right, and our next question is, can you discuss the real barriers to having a comprehensive connectivity strategy? And is it rural/urban or bipartisan issues?
I'll start this one off.
Thank
I
you.
shared some of the data when we started this conversation, just so everybody could know that this is not unique to one demographic. I think this is a major issue that we can walk all the way across the aisle in Harrisburg on, and that we can see, because I mean, I'm in Philly, but I'm sure that if I did a little digging, I'd find out there are neighborhoods in Pittsburgh that are not connected, who are in the city and are not able to access internet for a variety of reasons. And I cannot speak for any community that I don't serve, but I know where I serve, my constituents are 35% under the federal poverty rate. So when you start talking about people who work hard, who have jobs, but for a variety of reasons are almost trapped in a cycle of poverty where they're underpaid, they're not able to access these things. And we should not make something like internet some sort of prize that's, it's just for a few, it's for the select. Because as we're seeing, as we combat this coronavirus pandemic, people need to be connected for a variety of reasons. We could go from unemployment assistance all the way to just your children being able to get educated or get some supplemental education. I mean, YouTube classroom, there are real benefits to being able to stay connected. So I hope that this can be a bipartisan issue and that we can uplift everybody's voices together, because we've got to make sure that the companies that are doing this work, that they are working intentionally with us to really develop a plan, and whatever the barriers are that prevent them from being able to expand, that we're dealing with that in the legislature.
Yes, I'd like to just talk about this a little bit too. This is not a partisan issue. This is not a geographic issue. There are issues in rural Pennsylvania and in urban Pennsylvania. This issue, I always liken it to the Rural Electric Act back in the 1930s, when everybody was trying to get electricity to their homes. This is the same thing. It really is. Everybody needed electricity to be able to move forward back then. And now everybody needs to be able to connect, to be able to function in this world. And here again, this pandemic has just reiterated what we've all known, but it has really heightened it. So, I think as my leader has stated, we need the companies at the table. We need to come collectively together to find a plan for Pennsylvania that works. And it's going to be challenging. It's not going to be easy. And let's face it, it's going to take some kind of financial support. You can't do anything without money. Pure and simple. And it's the same way, for the companies that provide broadband. I recognize that, they can't just go lay 10 miles of fiber to pick up one home. They can't. It's not cost effective. We have to find a way to be able to help them do that. And collectively, we should be able to do that. And we can't drag our feet on this. This is not something that we can study and take years to try to figure out how to do it. We need to figure it out. We need to figure it out quickly.
Yeah, and then I'll just chime in. One of the nice things I think at the local level is, at least where I'm at, you don't see a whole lot of partisanship, right? You don't see a whole lot of two sides butting heads to achieve two different outcomes. The nice thing at the local level is, we have real issues. Connectivity is a real issue. Doesn't matter if you're red or you're blue, we want to solve the issue. So, in terms of actually deploying broadband strategies, I think I can speak for the majority of counties when I say if we're able to get some funding, we'll start deploying those solutions.
I just wanted to make a couple points. I sit on the board for SPC. They recently put a work group together looking at a strategic regional plan, and I think some good things are going to come out of that. But you all have hit the nail on the head. It's about funding. As Morgan said, we can identify projects, we can have plans in place, which we have done here in Armstrong County, but how do we get them to the finish line? And ultimately it's funding. The one thing Representative Snyder brought up that I really appreciate that she acknowledged was, if we do get another stimulus package and CARES Act funding does come back to the counties, there has to be some language in that legislation that gives counties the opportunity, a realistic opportunity, to complete projects in a timely fashion. That to have it done by December 31st, which would have helped a lot of people. We finally have funding. Now we can't use it. So I think that's important. I know there's some people on the call today that are well above my pay grade. If they could hear that message, if something else does come down, that there's language written into that we can get some of these projects done within a year or 2 years.
Thank you all. Our next question is going to be for Leader McClinton. Any thoughts on 5G connectivity specifically? It's our understanding that 5G can help with the capacity issues in the urban areas in particular.
Yes, that's an excellent question. So thank you to whomever posed it. I have had extensive meetings with some of the companies who do a lot of work throughout the state, frankly, but especially here. They have had a few challenges locally. Getting through our council, getting some of the barriers legislatively done through our council. So I have worked a little bit as a liaison to just make sure that there's nothing in place that's holding us back, because some of our policies, public policies, prohibit some of the expansion that we need. And we definitely need to be able to make sure that whatever the access is, because it all comes back to policies and cost. So the companies, of course, don't want to incur excessive costs in the efforts to expand. And if there are policies that are either saying how much it costs or that are causing trouble, we've worked on it in Harrisburg, but of course, on the local level, as our county commissioners have been sharing, they play a major role. So I've been working with my members of council that serve or overlap with my legislative district to make sure that their bills and that their policies are not inhibiting the growth, because that is the key. We want to see the growth, we want to have the access, but if our policies and the costs are what companies are saying just are not within reach or are not what other places with our population are charging, we have to figure that out amongst ourselves, because we don't want to just have Comcast skyscrapers like where people work and have great jobs. We want to make sure that the companies are able to also be able to get the services to the homes that need it.
Thank you, Leader McClinton. And our next question we have for the commissioners. Can you talk about the importance of infrastructure to business investment in your areas overall? Obviously connectivity, but anything else you'd like to raise since we are talking about infrastructure overall for roads, bridges, transit?
Morgan, if you don't mind, I'll kick this one off. As far as connectivity, we look at it as two issues here. We got to get it to the commercial businesses, and then we have to have basic connectivity into the homes. And I think we've identified some plans and projects that could do that and raise our percentages of people that have connectivity. Secondly, when you talk about obviously roads, bridges, if our county seat is in Katanning, PA, and Fort City and Katanning are Rivertown communities. That's where industry was, that's how why these towns were built here. Industry's gone away, and what happens is now that rail's been taken out, we can't get commercial barge traffic up the Allegheny River to where we were vibrant at one point, because we're not allowed to dredge because of mussels. So it makes it hard for our jobs as our economic development team or as county commissioners promoting properties along the river that were vibrant, that businesses actually want to come look and set up shop. But if you don't have rail anymore, and if you don't have commercial barge traffic that can't make it up the Allegheny, it makes it difficult. I know one thing we're doing here is one of our big initiatives working with SPC is we did a study on the extension of Route 28 and 66 up to Interstate 80. We think that would have a huge impact in the region. So we'll see where that goes. That just wrapped up here locally, but we're really going to push for funding for that project.
Speaking from Lawrence County, in terms of how business growth is pushing infrastructure growth, one of the areas in our county where there's not a whole lot of infrastructure, both in terms of traditional, right, so sewage, water, and in terms of connectivity is our southwest corridor. It's a corridor along Route 18 in Wampum, Pennsylvania, where there isn't a whole lot of infrastructure there. Recently, a large site was purchased by a developer out of the Pittsburgh area, closer to the city as opposed to closer to Lawrence, where he's going to put in a large-scale business park. Now, that in itself is driving a whole bunch of infrastructure north, moving it from the Beaver County line into Lawrence County along that corridor. And while that's beneficial to that business park itself, it also allows numerous houses, numerous residences, and other areas to be picked up in terms of being able to access sewage, in terms of being able to access water, and in terms of being able to access fiber lines, which is phenomenal. And then on top of that, that area of the county, which again has historically been disadvantaged in terms of infrastructure, you have other larger companies in that area saying, okay, you know, this business park was able to pull all of these infrastructure lines to this point. Now we're going to tap in, because now they're further up, and run the line even further, picking up more houses, picking up more residences, and giving our residents and our smaller businesses greater access to infrastructure. So I think in terms of business development, that's a large part of the ballgame, because if you're able to get someone other than a public entity to pay to run those lines, there's a much greater chance of it being done.
Thank you all. Our next question is going to be, most of the discussion has been around funding for connectivity, but looking at best practices, are there any areas any of you are looking at regionally or across the country that are doing it right? Anyone wants to jump in on that?
I mean, I'll jump in. I'm not really familiar with anyone that is doing it completely right. You know, I think some of the ideas that through my involvement with creating the Broadband Caucus, and as I said earlier, partnering with the Farm Bureau and the Grange and a lot of other organizations out there on this issue. You know, if you look, and the county commissioners ought to be able to appreciate this. You know, we were able to fund a 911 system many years ago based on a fee on people's landlines. You know, it's been suggested by folks at the Grange that, you know, maybe we look at a funding stream, something like that, a small fee on cell phone usage. You know, everybody has a device. We all recognize we've got to have money to be able to get this accomplished. So, you know, I'm not really sure about what other states have done and how they've been successful or not successful. I know I have researched some projects that happened in some counties down in Kentucky, and they were able to bring broadband to almost every structure in their county successfully. We have looked at some of those things, and you know, we need to really formulate, when we go back into session, Madam Leader, we need to really formulate a bipartisan effort to be able to do just those sorts of things, to be able to recognize we need to raise revenue somehow to make this happen, and we need to see the most easiest, cost-effective way to do that.
Well, I want to make sure that Representatives Val Gatos and Jake Wheatley and everybody else that Matt named off, that everybody hears it, because each of us only get one vote. And we have to get to 102 to be able to create revenue and to address these issues in a serious way, because the truth is we have to have funding. And with our gaping budget hole that continues to await us, we're not going to be able to deal with these priorities because of the burden of keep lights on and to keep our schools open. Like, we have so much more, though, if we haven't collected the amount of revenue we normally would. So we have to be creative, and we have to definitely be brave. And so to our commissioners, when we make some very tough decisions together, just, have our backs as much as you possibly can, because we're on a wild road ahead, revenue wise, for sure.
By no means am I an expert, but whether that's a public-private partnership, if it's suggested, or that we tack a fee on the cell phones, I think at the end of the day, we can all agree that this is a high priority. It needs to be done. The state of Pennsylvania, the Commonwealth, obviously our counties are going to benefit from it. It just needs to get done. And again, I know SPC's has a work group, and they're going to have a big voice in this. And we'll see where it goes. But I'll be the first to say I'm not the expert, but whatever you would need from us as a county, information, data, we just would like to see it get done.
So we're gonna, since we're looking at time, I would love to see if there's any other issues or subjects or regional connectivity that we haven't discussed yet, or any final thoughts before we close from each of you. So let's just start with our Democratic leader, McClinton. Let's start with you.
Absolutely. So first of all, again, to your president, Matt Smith, thank you for this invitation. To Jen Beer, that I work closely with, and to you, Patrice, you've been an excellent host, keeping this conversation going. And to the commissioners who I haven't met in person, I look forward to meeting you all, coming out to Armstrong and Lawrence and saying hello. And of course, to all of our colleagues, but especially my esteemed colleague, Pam, who has worked so hard on this issue. I mean, so very hard. We definitely will have a victory ahead as we continue to uplift this issue and make sure that both private is working with us, folks who work in the public, to see this come to some productivity, to see more access. It is very, very pressing, especially with the times, whether you're applying for a job, applying for unemployment, or just getting school virtually, or getting supplements. Like, you need to be able to get connected. And so the barriers that currently exist, we've got to work together to bring them down and make sure that we see a better future, where we're talking about, this time next year, the plans that have been made, the contracts that are underway, and what's going forward. That's what I look forward to at your next winter meeting when it comes around next year. So thank you so very much.
Thank you. Representative Snyder.
Thank you so much. And I too want to thank my leader for joining us today, and the chamber and NRG, and all of you for being here. County commissioners, God bless you. I know how hard your jobs are. And I just want to say too that, this is something that I have been championing for 3 years. This is not an easy issue, as I can personally tell you, but I will not stop until we find a solution and get this done. And I know that the president of Waynesburg University is on this call, and I just want to recognize President Lee and Waynesburg University. We were able to do a public-private partnership project that will touch Greene and Washington counties, and Waynesburg University was an integral part of that. I was able to jumpstart that with a $200,000 grant, and was able to get a private company and Kimber, a nonprofit, to join together. And they are laying, Clear Fiber is laying 81 miles of fiber as we speak. And that project is coming along very well. and it has the capabilities of picking up over 2,000 homes. And I know that there have been almost 100 homes that had zero opportunity to connect, have already signed on to that. So, you know, it's moving that boulder up the mountain, you know, step by step. And I will continue to do that and work with all of my colleagues on both sides of the aisle who I know all feel this is a very critical issue. And hopefully when we meet next year at this time, hopefully we'll have some solutions. So thank you for having me. It was a real honor to be here.
Thank you, Representative Snyder. Up next, Commissioner Boyd.
Absolutely. I'll echo my colleagues here in saying thank you to the chamber for hosting this conversation, and thank you to Leader McClinton, to Representative Snyder, and Commissioner Fabian for a wonderful discussion. You know, just to reiterate the issue here, when we were faced with the pandemic, Lawrence County, and again I go back to, we actually have a larger percentage of availability across our county than other counties in what's classified as the Northwest region of Pennsylvania. As a result of that, if you look at data from Harvard and Brown universities, our population, our economy was able to recover at a much faster rate compared to the rest of the state. And I think that, again, is largely attributable to our access to high-speed internet, because our people were able to get online faster, they're able to adjust faster. And as a result of that, we're actually, economically speaking, seeing increased levels of consumer spending relative to when we started the year in January. So, you know, to me, I think that's highlighting the impact that connectivity can have on our rural communities. Again, it provides a bridge for us to get into the 21st century marketplace. It provides a bridge for our residents to access medical care. It provides a bridge for our students to be able to learn effectively, whether they're going to college in, you know, University of Washington, St. Louis, Harvard, or wherever. At the end of the day, if we want to grow Pennsylvania, we have to remember that these rural communities exist, that we're not going away anytime soon, and we need to make sure that we're increasing our investment to allow rural citizens to get connected to the rest of the world. So thank you again. I'm looking forward to the next year of continuing these issues and continuing to find hopefully solutions. And thank you again to the chamber.
Thank you. And up next, Commissioner Boyd. Commissioner Fabian. Apologies.
I know he's young looking, but Madam Leader, Representative Snyder, Commissioner Boyd, thank you for the discussion. I just want to leave, you know, I think it's just important that we're talking about this as a high priority in the Commonwealth. And what I hear is so refreshing, considering the year of 2020 for so many reasons, especially politically. It's nice to hear two people in leadership and well-respected in Harrisburg talking about reaching across the aisle, working together to get things done. And that's what county government's about. It's about finding solutions for problems. I'm fortunate enough that I work with a Republican majority, being the lone Democrat in Armstrong County, but it doesn't feel like that. We get together, we talk about solutions and the issues, and we work to address them, and broadband being one of them, and connectivity. So it's just refreshing, given the climate and everything going on. So I just wanted to make that the point of emphasis here as we wrap up this conversation. Thank you for the great discussion, and it's refreshing and appreciated.
Thank you all. And again, thank you for your support. Thank you for your time. Thank you for just being here. And, you know, that brings our 2020 virtual Pittsburgh reception to a close. While we could not replace our normal in-person, you know, Duquesne Club, which I miss, you know, but we hope you can join us next year. We hope that these sessions were useful and informative. And again, thank you to our generous sponsors. Without you all, we would not be able to have this or support our work that we are doing in the region. So we hope to see you in person again. And until then, be safe, be well, and take care.